Hi everyone, it's Jennifer Hoffman of EnlighteningLife.com. This is another EPS, Energy, Purpose, and Soul training for those of you in the community, and I want to talk to you about crap. And no, I'm not being rude or insensitive or talking about bodily functions. I'm talking about things that lead to resistance and procrastination. CRAP stands for conditioned resistance and procrastination. They are enormous limiters to your continued movement forward in your business, in your life, in your success, and what you allow yourself to have. And they have a very solid foundation in your past, in your history, in the things that you have learned during the course of your life. So conditioned resistance is just that. It's how you have been conditioned because of what you've learned, because of what you think, to resist things in your life. So I'll give you an example from me because that's the best example. So as you know, I was paralyzed by a vaccine as a child and I didn't walk for 5 years. There were many things I couldn't do, and I grew up, I was 5 years old when it started. I was 11, almost 12 when I finally could walk again without braces and crutches and everything. And there were so many things I couldn't do that I learned very early on not to get too excited about things because I can't do that. So my first conditioned response to everything was, I can't do that. And even after I learned how to walk again, I had to be careful. My right leg was weaker. I didn't fully recover from the paralysis, but I had so conditioned myself to believe I can't do that, that my first response was always, I can't do that. And then I would prove to myself that I could do it, but it took a lot of doing. The procrastination part, the procrastination is putting things off and never finishing anything, comes from your conditioned response. So you can't do something, or you don't think you can, or you're not sure you can, so you procrastinate because it's easier to not do something than it is to try it and fail. So when you have this conditioned resistance and procrastination thing going on in your life, you're always stopping yourself from moving forward and you're procrastinating. But you're procrastinating because you have a fear of failure and a fear of shame and a fear of not being able to live up to your own expectations, much less those of anybody else. So you resist, but you're conditioned to resist. Another example of this is if you have a parent who was extremely critical, that was always telling you, you didn't do that right, or you can't do those things, or you secretly knew that your mother or somebody was jealous of you, so you don't upstage the queen, you don't do better, you don't show yourself to be more than your parent. And that prevents you from really expressing the full aspects of your energy because you can't decide for yourself that this is what you want. It goes even deeper than that. You are afraid that if you get what you want, there's a punishment, there's some kind of consequence. And the consequence is so great that you don't dare go there. So you put things off, you don't get started, you start and then you never finish because of your conditioned response. So I want you to look at the CRAP, the crap in your life, and see what your conditioned response is and where you procrastinate. And this is going to give you a really good example of how you respond to different things in your life. So starting a business is a big deal. You can be extremely successful. You can have a lot of things. You're out there in the public. People are talking about you. And your conditioned response may be, oh, but there's a consequence. That consequence is nobody will love me, or somebody may judge me, or people won't like me, or my mother won't like me, or I'll lose the love of my family, or something like that. Each of us has our own conditioned response based on what we think is the consequence. And then how do you procrastinate? What do you put off? What do you not do? What do you do instead? So you've got an assignment in your business model and you're out mowing your yard, or you find a TV show and you get stuck in that, and then you're sitting there for 2 hours watching this TV show and you think, oh, I've got to go to bed, but hey, I didn't do my work, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes next week and next month and next year. So in order for you to understand where you do that, you have to understand two things. What's your conditioned response? What do you always say to yourself when you try something new or you think of expanding some part of your life? And then in your mind and in your experience, What's the consequence for being successful? Because this is what you're trying to avoid, some kind of consequence that is so painful, so shameful, so difficult and challenging for you that you avoid it at all costs. And it may be something that happened 50 years ago, but for you, the pain is still there, so you hold it close to your chest and you say, no, I'm not going to go there because once upon a time something happened and I don't want to repeat that. And it doesn't matter how long ago that was. If the trauma was severe enough, it's still very, very close to your heart. So I'm going to challenge you to do something. I want you to identify your conditioned responses, and I want you to look at where you procrastinate. I want you to make a to-do list and to learn how to reward yourself for marking things off of your to-do list. If you have a conditioned response to avoid a consequence, then you also have to have a reward for not procrastinating. What's your reward? Make it meaningful, make it personal. Maybe you go out and get an ice cream at your favorite shop. Maybe you go and take a walk in the park. Maybe you go to the beach for the day. There has to be a reward in order to overcome that conditioned response that allows you to procrastinate to avoid a consequence. This is a big deal, and this is one of the points of failure that I see in my coaching students, in my business students, in all of my program students. They come up to a certain point and then there's this big block, and the big block is that conditioned response. So what do you want to have happen in terms of success? What consequence do you think faces you if you achieve that success? How does that lead you to procrastinate? Because that is a conditioned response. When I face success, I always do this because there's a consequence. So how can you turn that consequence into a reward and your conditioned response into a very thoughtful, considered, and aware intention to move forward step by step? That way you'll stop procrastinating, you'll look forward to your rewards, and the consequences won't be there anymore because you've replaced them with rewards. This is Jennifer Hoffman. Thanks so much for being part of the GPS Business Academy 90-Day Quick Start program. I really enjoy having you here, and I hope this is helpful for you. If you have any comments, please, you can email them to me at support@enlighteninglife.com.